3 days of inspiration, content, and connections with fellow executive women at leading retailers and brands. You can't miss the 2021 Women in Retail Leadership Summit. Connect with and learn from inspirational women leaders at this exclusive boutique event from October 11th to the 13th. The safety of our attendees is our number one priority. Go to womeninretailsummit.com for our full event safety plan and to register to attend. We can't wait to see you there.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Women in Retail Talks. I'm Melissa Campanelli, the co-founder of the Women in Retail Leadership Circle and the brand and content director for the Retail and Travel Group at NAPCO Media. And today I'm thrilled to be speaking with Danielle Moser, an executive learning center leader and executive coach at Talent Solutions Right Management, which is a global talent management firm offering career management and leadership development solutions. Danielle is also a coach that has spoken at many of our events, and we're so excited to have her here. Today, we will be talking with Danielle about the tremendous challenges that are facing the global workforce as we start to emerge from the pandemic. We have a lot to unpack here, so let's get started. Welcome, Danielle.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, so happy to have you on today. So I'm just going to jump right in. What light can you shed on what we're all seeing in the media today about the Great Resignation and the Great Retirement? I'm sure everyone's been seeing that out in the media. And what that all means for our members and our listeners.
You're so right, Melissa. There's lots in the news lately that's focused on the Great Resignation and the Great Retirement. You know, for myself, and I'm sure everybody's feeling the same way, we keep hoping that all of this is going to be over soon. But we are still in the midst of a once in a generation economy-wide disruption. And with that, the intensity of the talent challenge really is only getting stronger. So here's a for instance, when we look at workforce data from across the US, we are seeing seismic reshuffle. I mean, it's really kind of scary. Like the quit rates have never been higher than in the last decade. And this trend is happening across all kinds of roles, right? Like it's lower wage roles, but it's also professional kinds of roles. There's also an unprecedented number of job openings. I mean, literally, right now, they're at an all-time high. And again, that is across the economy. So, that impact to business, it's really staggering. And I make no bones about the fact that I am a huge fan of the Gallup organization. And I know, I try not to fangirl about it, but I do. And one of the things that their research shows is that the cost to replace an individual employee can range from like 1/2 to up to 2 times the employee's annual salary. And that's just really kind of a conservative estimate. So when we say it can have an incredible impact on businesses, that's why. Now, I'm sharing these as data points, and as I'm doing so, I have to tell you about this conversation I had with a chief human resource officer earlier this week. I love the fact that and I hope she doesn't mind me quoting her, by the way, she characterized like the Great Resignation and the Great Retirement kind of as events. She said, it feels like those are facts. And she said, really, my big question is, okay, well, what do we do about it? So
that is a great question.
Isn't it? I know, right?
Let's focus on that for a second. I mean,
Okay.
Our listeners most of them are leaders. What should we do about them?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, in order to answer that question, I got to create some context for it. So our organization, as you said, we're Talent Solutions Right Management. We are a part of Manpower Group. And our CEO, Jonas Preising, and our president, her name is Becky Frankowitz, they both have a seat at the World Economic Forum. And wow. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty impressive. It's really cool to be able to watch, their impact and kind of as an organization, as this family of brands, the impact that we have on doing some of this global research, right? And so what's cool about that is it really does make us global workforce advisors. And so, it's with that context that I offer what our insight is. And I love this because what we're thinking about is that if we characterize the Great Resignation and the Great Retirement as events, we're looking at what's behind it, what the real driver of it is. And we're calling that the Great reawakening.
Hmm.
I know, isn't that, it's kind of
That's great.
it's a cool term. You know, and what the great reawakening is it's like it's each one of us reassessing our priorities and embracing our power to make different decisions about our lives and our careers. I mean, we talked about this earlier. What drove my relocation from a community that we loved and had lived in for 15 years to where we are in the Raleigh-Durham area was our great reawakening, where we said what matters most is family, and the preponderance of family is here. Therefore, this is where we're going to be. I mean, like that's just like a microcosm of an example. But that's really where it is that we need to be focusing our attention, is on addressing what's the driver behind these events.
Yeah, I mean, that is it's almost like a real positive spin, which I
Yeah.
like. But let's talk a little bit about what that means for women. Even before the pandemic, women face barriers to advancement in the workplace, but the outbreak of COVID-19, we've been reading, has had an outsized impact on women.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So, like, what pressures emerge from the pandemic that are making women reconsider their careers? And where should they be focusing their attention?
Well, again, I'm going to start with some context setting around what some of those challenges are that women in the workplace have faced. And so I'm just going to put it out there that if our listeners have not read the McKinsey Women in the Workplace 2020 report and research, there's a new one, an updated one. Absolutely go take a look for that and dig into it, because the pressures of the pandemic are driving countless women to consider either downshifting their career, which is tragic enough, but also to leave the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in fact, in the last couple of years, it's been termed, and I have to say this slowly because I always mess it. It's like a she session of women vacating the workplace. McKinsey, as a matter of fact, their data point says that 1 in 4 women report that they're considering doing that. Again, like the downshifting or the leaving of the workforce. And, there's lots of factors that are driving them. And, in some cases, it's lack of flexibility at work, and I know this is one that many women I talk to, female leaders that I speak to, say that they feel like they need to be available at all times. In other words, kind of like that they're always on. Certainly, women still are carrying the burden of housework and child education and caregiving, and that's only been amplified by the pandemic. Women also tend to worry that their performance is being negatively judged because of those caregiving responsibilities. And again, that's been made worse by the pandemic. Women also share things like they're uncomfortable sharing the challenges that they're facing, sometimes with teammates and sometimes with their managers or their leaders. Sometimes they say they feel blindsided by decisions that affect their day-to-day work, or this is a really sad one for me personally, just because my career has been about helping people make their lives better through their work. But many women report that they're unable to bring their whole self to work. And I know that our fellow members really can certainly relate to some or all of these. I mean, Melissa, you and I, even before the pandemic, you and I had kind of conversations about some of these challenges, the juggling of the housework and all those kinds of things, right?
100%.
So for me, that as we think about, and I'm going to answer your question, that again, as we look at this contextually, we can't lose sight of the fact that there are certain segments of women who experience these challenges really at even higher rates. So just as for instance, mothers are more likely than fathers to worry that their performance is being negatively judged due to their caregiving responsibilities. Unfortunately, Black women are more likely than men and women overall, right? Like more than men and women altogether to feel like they can't bring their whole selves to work. And women in senior leadership roles are more likely than men who are at the same level of leadership, to feel as though they're in that always on mode. But I want to share this story with you and with our listeners, because it was really an empowering story for myself and the other colleagues with whom I was in this meeting. So a few weeks ago, I was in a breakfast meeting with our president, Becky Frankowitz. And she was trying to reinforce to those of us that were in the meeting how important it is for us to feel like we have permission and for us to set the example about a work-family blend. Now, I'm pausing just for a second because I want to just reinforce, she said work-family blend. She didn't say work-family balance. And this is interesting, right? Because balance suggests that there's like this tension between them, like they're opposing forces. And so for her, she likes the word blend, or I've heard people say to it as work-family integration. I think it's all just a beautiful new paradigm. But anyway, Becky was saying that how she handles things as a mother and a leader. And one of her rules is that she always answers the phone when her kids call. So she tells them, like when she answers the phone, she'll say, look, I'm in a meeting. Do you need me or can I call you back? So she was in a meeting with our CEO, Jonas, and one of her daughters calls and she says, excuse me, I need to take this call. And she says she steps out. And there had been an incident, and I mean, her daughter was fine, but she was very upset. And so Becky was able to handle it and then go back into the meeting. And she said, if I can interrupt a meeting with our CEO because my kids need me, that should give anybody permission in this organization to do the same. And what's so powerful about that is I just think it's just a beautiful message for us as women leaders to say how we can set that example, how we can set that expectation, that it's okay that we recognize that our families come first. Because she said, thank goodness that she was okay, but she was upset and she needed me. And what would that have been like for her if I hadn't answered that call? And what would that have been like for me as a mother? Like, we can't separate who we are. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's a great story. And that's a perfect example of what we were saying earlier about you're bringing your whole self to work. I mean,
exactly.
So how are organizations responding to this crisis? Are they doing this sort of stuff, or the example that you just shared, or what other things could they be doing?
Well, I think it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of how organizations are responding. I think the biggest challenge for organizations is really about how they retain and engage their existing employees, right? Like, let's stop the great resignation and the great retirement because people don't feel like they're engaged in their work. But, I think this is especially true for women, that organizations need to figure out how they can attract high quality talent to come through the doors and to retain the high quality talent that they already have. This answer is really absolutely critical, that they address the challenges that employees are facing now. I mean, this is happening right now. This isn't something that organizations can say, oh, well, we'll deal with it next year. That may be too late. It really is kind of a now issue. And here's the really interesting thing, where we're kind of talking about these giant data points. But the fact of the matter is, this is really something that's happening at an individual, a personal, a human level. And so organizations really need to give their employees a strong sense of support. And this is the word I love the most, a sense of belonging within their organization. I mean, isn't that just such a beautiful concept?
I've been hearing that title come up often. I don't know. I feel like there's like chief belonging officers or belonging department. I feel like that's been coming up a lot. I think that's really cool.
I think the thing though, Melissa, is that like, it's not some, I don't know what the right word is.
It's not just a term. It means something. Right?
Yeah. It's not just this kind of theoretical, aspirational. It really is something that is powerful. It is a basic human need that we have a sense of belonging. If we look at this, I hate to say this, but if we look at it from the negative context, that's why cults and gangs have the impact and the influence that they do, is because they tap into that human need for belonging. And so organizations don't need to be cults. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that we can connect with each other as humans. And I think that's the vein where leaders can look.
So let's get specific though. Like, what are some like specific things that organizations can do to emulate this idea or create this kind of a culture, I guess?
Yeah. So, at Manpower Group, we've identified 4 primary ways in which organizations, and very specifically leaders, can do this. And one of the first ways is just to accelerate onboarding. And that's something that contributes to that dynamic of attracting new employees. why this is so important is because if an organization can make sure that when someone is new to the role or new to the company, that they feel embraced and that they belong, again, to use that word, then it's going to help set them up for success. It's going to enable them to do their job and do it well and do it in an environment that feels supportive. I can think back on my career and really now look at it and say, okay, maybe here are some factors that contributed to me not feeling as strongly connected to that organization or that role. And it had to do with that lack of human connection, that I want to understand how what I do fits into the context. And I want to know that somebody's got my back. There was recent research that was done by the ADP Institute, and that's led by Marcus Buckingham. And he was originally with the Gallup organization. People may know his name as associated with the strengths movement. But in the research that they did at the ADP Institute, one of the biggest drivers of engagement, again, kind of core around this idea of belonging, is knowing that either our team members or our leaders have our backs. What that translates to is organizations need to act in a way that makes anyone who's new to their role or the company, again, feel like they're being supported, that the organization is invested in their success. Because, let's face it, if an employee is successful in doing their role, then that translates to the organization's success. My career has been largely focused on, in terms of the way I lead, I'll be specific about that. Take good care of your employees, and your employees will take good care of your customers. And that's what takes care of your bottom line. There's this cycle. Harvard did a lot of research on it. It's called the service profit chain. And it's that kind of a concept. It's recognizing that doing a good job of taking care of your employees is simply good business.
Yeah, it's not. Of course, it's important to take care of your employees, for themselves, and for the good of the company. But it's also really makes a difference on how they treat the company's customers. So it's really, it's sort of a chain. I really think that's so interesting. So we kind of covered one area, but in addition to attracting new talent, going back to the events around Great Resignation and Great Retirement that we talked about earlier, how can organizations retain and engage their existing employees?
That's a great question. And this one may feel, hopefully really familiar to folks. The second of the 4 ways that Manpower Group identified are really around enabling hybrid teams. And so, in other words, what I mean by that is enabling teams in a hybrid environment. So, even before the pandemic, there were those of us that worked all in person. There were those of us that worked entirely remotely. And then some of us were doing a blend. But the pandemic, as we know, put most of us into a remote environment. And it really did change the way that we interact with each other. It changed the way that we work with each other. I think personally that women have an edge here because, given as leaders that, we tend to be a little bit more relationship focused than our male counterparts. But I think one of the things that was lost, and this goes back to, how the change kind of in team dynamics and team interaction. One of the things that was lost when we went remote were things like hallway chats and kind of that spontaneous collaboration that happened. And, part of it was driven by schedules, right? We signed on to a meeting and we started onto the agenda because we had 45 minutes or an hour. And, then the meeting was over and then we all disconnected. And, it didn't necessarily give us that opportunity to be able to have some of that interaction that we would have had. And so, here's a practical kind of an idea. If you haven't already, try building some time into meetings to allow for that human connection. As we emerge back from the pandemic, though, there are going to be people that are working in person and not in person. And the bottom line is organizations really need to focus on creating an environment where people can work together, whether they are remote or on the ground, because that's where they're really going to deliver the most value. We know there's lots of data out there that says when employees are engaged, they're more productive, and that's better for business. So, all right, let me get back to your question. Okay, so you asked about the other 2 ways for retaining and engaging. So of the 4 ways that employers can address the challenges, The third way is really about boosting career growth within an organization.
Mm.
And so, I sigh as I say this because something just came to mind for me. It was actually a conversation I was just having with an organizational leader. And it was about a generational thing and about, millennials and how, sometimes they're painted with this big, broad brush about, what it is that they expect from the workplace. And I will say I am incredibly grateful to the millennial generation, especially if we paint them with that big, broad brush, around the fact that they, I think, drew a spotlight to this concept of career growth. Like, they are not satisfied with orders of just go do that. They want to know why it matters. They want to know the bigger picture, the context, and how they can continue to learn and grow. And I think that's just really kind of core as we think about this concept of how to boost career growth. So one of the ways to think about this, again, for our membership from a leadership perspective, is it's about allowing and enabling women to see their future within the organization. Let's just keep it kind of, focused on women. It's about their fit within their current role and what may come next to them. So one of the ways to do that is to focus on how to customize each woman's development and growth experiences at work and not make assumptions about them. I think sometimes leaders or managers can look and say, oh, somebody's great at that, so I'm just going to have them do more of that. Okay, that's one way to look at it. The other way, which is really the more productive way, is to have a conversation and say, you're really good at that. How much more of this do you want to do? Because maybe what it provides for them is a leadership development opportunity for them to train someone else to do it so they can go move on to something else. Because just because you do something well doesn't mean you like to do it. So, right? So there's a difference there. And that's why career conversations can be so incredibly important. Ask questions. Like, here's some really practical questions to ask. Like, let's make this tangible. If you are going to have a career conversation, you can ask, how do you want to progress your skill set? What role is it that you want to play in the future? What drives your happiness in your role day to day? In other words, if you reflect back on your day, what gives you energy versus what saps your energy? Let's face it, this is not a perfect world, Melissa. So, it's not as though everybody's going to have only the job they want. But if you can hear from your employees, what are things that really energize them, and you give them more of that, it's better for them and it's better for the organization. It just bottom line, that's the way it works. So, again, it's about having some crucial conversations, and those may be more formal, but they also can be informal conversations. If you're in a retail environment and you're, it's a store manager or a director, and they're kind of on the floor and they have an opportunity to help, block the shelves or, straighten something or, sort merchandise or whatever, and have a conversation with an employee, it's an opportunity to have one of those conversations.
Sure. Yeah. It seems like so simple, right? And
Yeah.
it's so simple, yet it's so complex,
Yeah.
But anyway, let's move on. So this seems like an obvious question. What is the fourth way? We've covered three.
Well, the fourth one, I left this one for last because, again, I really think this is a place that women have an edge, and that's about creating an inclusive culture. And, one of the things, and I've shared this with you and Jen, I love the way women in retail leadership, has such a regular and a strong focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We know it's good for people, and it's absolutely good for business. So this idea of creating an inclusive culture, if we agree that it's absolutely critical for business success, then it's important that we pay attention to women and intersectional women. And the reason it's so important is that going back to, and you said this yourself, like bringing your whole self to work allows you to do better work, right? We know that there's that strong correlation. And I think that's something we all want. I don't think any of us goes to work and says, oh, I'm going to do a lousy job today. We all want to go and give the best of ourselves every day. And like I said, that's really been my life's work. I was really fortunate. I was in my 20s and I had really great women mentors who helped me see that, like what everything I do is about helping people make their lives better through the work they do, because life is really too short for work to stink. I mean, that's just a basic premise. And that's really at the heart. I love it because it's right at the heart of the Great Reawakening.
Yeah.
What I like about, and this is what I think is so powerful about the Great Reawakening, it's really a lens through which organizations can look to figure out how to create a culture and an environment in a broad-based way so that both leaders and managers, right, like, can figure out how to engage women in a way that doesn't, whether intentionally or not, make them feel like they're, and I'm using air quotes as I say this so you can't see them, to make them feel other, because for those who might feel other, organizations have got to ensure that women have the right tools and the capabilities to engage and build their careers and perform at their best. The data points, again, are just staggering about the number of women that are looking at leaving the workforce. And in the midst of this great resignation and the great retirement, it just exacerbates that. So organizations, they've got to recognize and proactively work to remove barriers that prevent women from being the most productive and engaged selves.
What do you imagine the result will be if organizations act in these ways?
I know these are things about, I daydream about these things a lot, I will admit. I think that all these things together can really help move the needle on creating that sense of belonging that we talked about earlier. It can help women feel that their organizations, from the top all the way to the bottom, contribute to that environment that makes them feel supported and happy and engaged. It can create that environment where it makes them feel like this is really where they want to be. And that's what drives business success, across any KPI. So.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we close?
If I can, I would like to put out an invitation to our audience, please, to join us. The Women in Retail Leadership Circle, the summit is coming up. And on Tuesday of the summit, that's October 12th, we are going to be facilitating a breakout group that's going to do a deeper dive into this topic. And our goal is that each one of our participants is going to walk away with practical ideas that she can put into practice, in her own organization. I can't wait for it. I'm so excited.
It's going to be great. I'm excited too. I hope I'll be able to join that group, that workshop. But this has been so great, Danielle. I always love talking to you. You always have such great viewpoints, and then also such great practical tips for our folks to share. So, but unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Okay, so I also want to thank all of you for listening to this episode of Women in Retail Talks. For more information on this podcast, you can check out our podcast channel page at womeninretail.com/podcast for our show notes. And just to let you know, Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Also, please make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review it. So until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks. Thanks so much, Danielle.
Thanks.
Join us for this year's Women in Retail Leadership Summit, being held October 11th to the 13th. Go to womeninretailsummit.com for our full event safety plan and to register to attend. We can't wait to see you there.